GridRival here, and this is my F1 fantasy team for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Let's get into it. So first of all, to recap on how things went for me in Monza. Team 1, I had McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri as my times 2, Albon, Bortoleto, Lawson, Alonso. Obviously getting hit by the Alonso DNF. Came away with 233 points and a 1.9 budget rise. In terms of the transfers, it was Albon and Ferrari in for Stroll and Aston Martin, which did give me a plus 94 points wise, but a 0.1 budget wise. However, happy to say that the team climbed up over 4,000 places and it's just ever so slightly outside that top 1%. For Team 2, different story. I went McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri times 2, Albon, HAAS, Stroll, Alonso. Getting hit by the Alonso DNF and Stroll with a -1, so 215 points, but a 1.9 budget rise. Transfers wise, I did take a -10. I brought in Albon, HAAS, Ferrari for Norris, Lawson, and Aston Martin. Did come away with a plus 52 points and 0.6 budget, but obviously the -10 and the Alonso DNF hitting me, and so it meant I had to change Piastri to my times 2 because I no longer had Norris. So that was a -12. Despite that, the team did climb up 1,000 places. And finally, for Team 3, I had McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri times 2, Albon, Bortoleto, Alonso, Hulkenberg not even starting the race. So a double DNF for me for Team 3, 207 points, 1.1 budget rise. Transfers, it was Albon and Ferrari for Norris and Aston Martin. Did give me a plus 56 and a 0.2 budget rise, but did lose 200 places. And so once again, Team 2 and Team 3 playing leapfrog. However, they are now the exact same points and the exact same rank. So they're fighting for dominance in Azerbaijan, with Team 1 just on the sidelines waiting to enter the fray. Now, just for curiosity, I also ran a manual 4A build of McLaren, Mercedes, Piastri, Russell, Bortoleto, HAAS, Lawson. That came away with 234 points and a plus 2.4 in budget gain. So compared to my Team 1, 1 point less, but a lot more budget, 0.5 I think, in budget. So despite Ferrari being good in Monza, this build would have actually been okay. On Discord, there were some interesting builds that I found, and something I found really interesting was we've got a 4A build here of McLaren, Ferrari, Piastri, Leclerc, HAAS, Bortoleto, Lawson, 271 points with a 2.2 budget gain. However, someone else ran a McLaren, Ferrari, Norris, Albon, HAAS, Bortoleto Sainz build, and that came away with more points, 295 points, but a less budget of 1.9. So my point here is, when you compare the two, is 4A really that great? Or is Albon the 4A light driver, as I've been hearing? Is Albon the 4A light driver? Really interesting to see that. And also, someone made a genius move here, final fixing Alonso to Verstappen, getting 55 extra points. Now again, I looked at the number 1 team in the global rankings. They had McLaren, Ferrari, Norris, Bortoleto, HAAS, Lawson, Stroll. Came away with 268 points and 1.9 budget rise. They've now hit the 4,000 points mark, so well done to them. So really strong team. They actually traded Piastri for Norris, and they also brought in HAAS for Alonso, so they avoided the Alonso DNF and got the extra points with Norris. 39 plus with 0.4 price rise. As you can see, they changed their 2 times to Norris because they traded Piastri, and that gave them an extra 12 points. So really dominant display by the number 1 team in the global rankings. So looking at the elite data, and for this one I was looking at the Limitless and Wildcard. So for Limitless in the global 500, it was 2.2%, also 1.8% final fixing, and then on the Wildcard it was 11%, and then in the Patreon it was 0.8% Limitless, 1% final fix, and 7.8% Wildcard. So very minuscule numbers, but just curious to see who was rebuilding their teams and final fixing. Now in terms of driver picks, you may be kicking yourself that you went for Piastri and you had Alonso. Don't worry, you're not alone. In the global 500, 92.6% of teams had Piastri in their team, with 86.2% having him as their ×2. Also 66.8% kept Alonso in their team. One good thing to note here was that Albon was picked by 52.8% of teams, a change of 51.2%, bringing him in. A lot of a third of teams also going for Sainz, so you know, a triple Williams, I'm presuming, if not double Williams. Also, HAAS 63.4% was picked, a plus 53.8%, bringing him in. Only 15.4% of teams had Norris. In fact, 36% of teams decided to let Norris go. And then in the bottom half, only 10.8% had Leclerc, with 3.6% Verstappen. In the Patreon 500, again, 94.6% had Piastri, with 88.1% having him as their ×2. Again, 81.9% had Alonso, but 12.5% did let Alonso go. 54.5% had HAAS, 53.1% had Albon, and a third teams had Sainz. Only 13.9% had Norris, 45.1% of teams trading Norris out. And then again, in the bottom half, 5.4% had Leclerc, 1% had Verstappen. So let's look at the budget builder going into Azerbaijan. For tier A's, it's your usual. Piastri is at the top, best pick for ×2. However, Verstappen is now an option. He only needs 2 points for a price rise, 27 for a 0.3. Verstappen could be strong in Azerbaijan. I have to wait and see. I'm not ruling out Russell. He needs 23 points for only for a 0.1 rise, but for me now, all tier A drivers are on the table. For the TA constructors, we've got obviously McLaren. We've all got McLaren. If you're looking for the 4A build, then Red Bull is now a good choice for a price rise and points. I'm not ruling out Mercedes, and I'm not ruling out Ferrari. I'm taking the budget builder with a pinch of salt now in terms of the A tiers, because we are now looking at points, but these are your picks. Now for the tier B drivers, obviously this is where we gain most of our budget, so I am still trying to get that balance of budget and points. Now what is interesting here, and that I would be wary of, is that HAAS, Albon and Bortoleto are the only B tier drivers that, as things stand, will go into Singapore with double-digit points from Monza. Behrman, Colapinto, Gasly, Lawson, etc. all have 6 or less points from Monza. So it's something to bear in mind, because obviously all the points from the previous race, Zandvoort, will drop off. So for me, the obvious choices are HAAS, Albon and Bortoleto for both points / budget. That being said, I'm also looking at Behrman because he's a good shot for a price rise, but the reason I like Behrman is for points, and I'm going to get to that in a second. Colapinto and Gasly are on the price floor. If I had to pick out the two, I'd pick Gasly, and I'm still not ruling out Lawson. Lawson, I suspect, will get a price drop in Azerbaijan, but he's cheap and he can pull off some good results at times. Same with Ocon and same with Sainz, although they're not really in my thoughts, to be honest, right now. In terms of the tier B constructors, if you were to go with, say, a triple McLaren and then a B tier constructor, or just two A tier drivers and an A tier constructor with a B tier constructor, then VCar Racing Bulls, are currently your best pick for points and budget gains. However, I'm not ruling out Williams. Williams looked strong in practice at Monza, and they're potentially going to be strong at Baku. HAAS is also another option. The only trouble with HAAS is they kind of flounder at the moment. So for me, I'd be looking at the Racing Bulls and the Williams if I was to go with a B tier constructor, unless Aston Martin, come back with something really strong. Now, I mentioned Behrman, which I'll get to in a sec, but the other thing I wanted to look at now moving forward is the statistics, because obviously we're trying to gain those points now, as well as keeping our budget flowing. For your total fantasy points scored, it's the two McLarens, Piastri and Norris, followed by Verstappen, Russell and Hamilton. Leclerc's not in the top 5. Now, I don't know if he's got the same points as Hamilton. However, Leclerc was strong in Baku last year, so I'm not ruling him out. My point here is that two A tier drivers, I think, are going to be strong in Baku. Overtakes wise, when we come down to our B tier drivers, this is why I like the look of Oliver Behrman. He has 77 overtakes, 7 more than Carlos Sainz, but also Bearman is pretty good in street races. I mean, he made his debut at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix last year in a Ferrari, which is technically a street track. I like the look of Bearman in a street track. He was good in China. Well, he was good in China, but China's not a street track. But my point is, for overtakes wise, I am looking at Bearman, and that's why he is in my thoughts. If he can get a good run of overtakes at Baku, whether it be due to other cars DNFing or pitting late or whatever, just on track alone, I think Bearman could get a couple of overtakes. Now, Sainz and Hulkenberg, I'm a bit wary of for different reasons. Sainz had that crash with Perez last season in Baku, and Hulkenberg, I don't know if this is going to be a Sauber track. At the moment, I'm not sure. Again, with Alonso, if Aston Martin can pull something out, then maybe. And then Hamilton should really be towards the front, so I'm not expecting him to get too many overtakes. But yeah, that's why I'm looking at Bearman. Podiums wise, again, it's two McLarens, Piastri, Norris, and then we've got Verstappen, Russell, and then we do have Leclerc. Again, this is partly why triple McLaren is in my thoughts going into Baku, but I'm also swaying towards the 4A. I'm a bit torn between the two ideas at the moment, which we'll get to in team selection. And then we've got the top 10 finishes. We've got Piastri, followed by Russell, Verstappen, Norris, Leclerc. And this is where it puts me off of the triple McLaren and going for two A-tier drivers, or if I can do it, a 4A build. So where does that leave me with my teams? Now, I already worked this out last night, and for Team 1 at the moment, I'm minded to let Alonso go and bring in Isaac Hadjar, and then that would give me a transfer going into Singapore when I would definitely be considering the 4A build. I'm considering it already, just the Team 1 doesn't really have the budget for it. Now, if I want to use both transfers, I'd probably drop Lawson, and that is where I could go for Oliver Bearman. But like I say, at the moment, I'm swaying towards keeping Lawson just to have that extra transfer going into Singapore. Now, for Team 2, I'd be minded to drop the Aston Martin boys, which would be both of my transfers. I've already got Hadjar, so I like Bortoleto at the moment, both for price and just because he can put in some really good performances. And then I was thinking Lawson, but again, I think I can also go Bearman. I can. So that's on the table for me as well. Otherwise, if I decide to just make one transfer and carry a transfer into Singapore, I'd probably drop Stroll just because he's more expensive. And then I'd bring in Bortoleto because he's cheap and I think he could do well. And then that way, I've got 6 million in the bank. I'd have 3 transfers in Singapore, and then I'd be looking to drop Alonso, probably Albon, and then see if I can move into that 4A build. I can do it technically, but only with a Mercedes Russell, I believe, and at the bottom of the barrel B-tier assets. Now for Team 3, I'm at the moment very, very, very tempted to play my wild card because this team needs a reshuffle. And so right now, I'd be getting rid of Hulkenberg, Alonso, and Albon just for a second. And then the options I've got here is I could go 4A, but in order to do that, I have to drop Ferrari. So I could go Russell with Mercedes, and then Bearman, and then Hadjar. That's one option. However, you can see it only leaves me 0.1 in the bank. That's the thing I don't like. Also, Leclerc was good here last year. So if I want to bring Leclerc, I'd have to drop Russell, drop Bearman, bring in Leclerc, and then I'd have to go down towards the bottom, and I could either go Lawson, I could go Sainz, or Gasly. I'm not looking at Colapinto. Right now, probably Lawson, because I like the racing balls. And I just don't know about Sainz because of his crash last year with Perez. Now, if for some reason I decide not to play wildcard, and at the moment I don't think that's likely, I'd probably drop Hulkenberg and Ferrari, go to Mercedes. No, that's not. I was wondering if I'd have enough to go for the 4A, because I don't really want to get rid of Albon. Let me just see if I do get rid of Albon. So I'd have to get rid of Albon. So let me refresh this. It would have to be Hulkenberg and Albon. But then I'd have to take an extra 10 for the Ferrari. Because otherwise, yeah, I'm not going to have enough. So for me, I think it's definitely going to be a wild card play. Otherwise, can I do a triple McLaren build? Yes, but only with Sauber or Alpine, which I don't like. So I definitely think it's going to be a wild card for me in Team 3. Let's get rid of Alonso. Let's go Behrman and Hajar. Could do something like that if I want to use both transfers and save my wild card. But I think I'm going to be looking at the wild card for Team 3. So Chips Limitless is on the table if you've still got it. Wild card is definitely on the table if you need to rebuild your team. Final Fix is always on the table. And I'm not ruling out Autopilot. I'm not ruling out Autopilot because it's a street track. That being said, for me, I'm at the moment minded to keep hold of it till Vegas. No negative is an option because it's a street track, but then we have got other circuits to come, Brazil, Vegas. So wait and see. Weather should be fine though. Extra DRS, not interested right now because it's not a sprint weekend. I don't have a 4A build. Now, if you're here in the UK, the schedule for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix in 2 weeks. Friday the 19th of September, practice 1. It's an early one, 9:30 in the morning, followed by practice 2 at 1 o'clock. Then on the Saturday, practice 3 is at 9:30, so make sure you get up early. And then qualifying is at 1 o'clock, so make sure you're locking your teams before 1 o'clock, Saturday the 20th of September. And then the race is a midday race for us here in the UK, 12 PM on Sunday the 21st. Weather-wise, bear in mind I'm recording this 2 weeks before the race. But at the moment, it's going to be dry, nice hot day. Now, because of the heat, I would say this favours Ferrari. I would keep an eye on Mercedes as well. But yeah, it should be fine. 25 degrees Friday, 25 degrees Saturday, and then 26 degrees on Sunday. Now, the top 12 last year in F1 Fantasy at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix was Piastri and Norris, which is why I mentioned the triple McLaren build earlier on, followed by Leclerc, which is why Leclerc is in my thoughts. Hamilton came fourth in the Mercedes. Obviously, this year he's in the Ferrari, so he could be a good pick. Followed by Russell and then Verstappen. So 4A drivers, 4A tier drivers looking good for Baku. And then the bottom 6 was Alonso and Albon. This is why Albon is still in my thoughts for Baku and why I'm likely to keep him. And why I've not completely ruled out Alonso, just that Alonso's bad for budget. Colapinto got 9 points, but he's not in my thoughts this year. Followed by Ocon with 7 and Behrman with 7, and then Shogun Yu with 7. Now, in case you missed it, a couple of things. Daniel Ricciardo has become a global ambassador for Ford Racing. So good luck to good old Danny Rick. I believe he's going to be especially helping out with the Ford Mustang. And if you didn't know, Ford actually have their own Ford Mustang championship that they hold in America on the GT World Channel. Monaco, unfortunately, has been extended till 2031. So we have another, what's that, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, another 6 years of Monaco. And needless to say, fans aren't too best pleased about it. So this is just a quick recording I took after the news broke of people's reactions. You probably already know this, but Pierre Gasly has extended his contract with Alpine till 2028. Hopefully Alpine will look better next year with the Mercedes engine. And so Flavio Briatore and the Alpine team really putting their trust in Pierre, who's not had a great season this year, but that's more the car than him, I would say. And finally, Gunther Steiner is getting back into motorsport. Only this time he's going down the bikes route. He has purchased the Tech3 KTM MotoGP from next year. He did an interview with his fellow co-hosts on the Red Flag podcast. I'll put a link down in the description below if you want to check out the video. But yeah, check it out. It's kind of cool. I haven't watched MotoGP myself for over 20 years. I used to watch it with my dad when I was younger. So I don't know how good this team is that he's brought, but if you're into MotoGP, Gunther Steiner will be involved from next year. Now, no F1 this weekend, sadly. However, there's still plenty of motorsport to watch if you want to fill that void. And I've got 3 picks for you. This past weekend was the World Endurance Championship, Lone Star of Le Mans, so 6 hours of the Circuit of the Americas. Now, the race was yesterday. I don't know the results at the time of this recording. However, if you subscribe to their YouTube channel, if you don't have a membership on their app, they do eventually tend to upload both highlights and the full race, so I'm keeping an eye out for those. Secondly, my second pick is the Suzuka 1000 kilometer, which is the 4th round of the International GT World Challenge. So GT3 racing, and I think they may have some GT4s, I'm not sure, but definitely GT3 racing cars. I've been watching the GT World Challenge and the Intercontinental GT Challenge this year. It's been a lot of fun, so I'm really looking forward to this, and this takes place this weekend between the 12th and 14th of September. And if you subscribe to the GT World channel, they tend to stream these events live. I haven't seen it advertised yet, but I imagine they will. They streamed every round so far this year: the Bathurst 12-hour, the 24 hours at the Nürburgring, the 24 hours at Spa. So be sure to check that out. Highly recommend. But my personal pick this weekend would be the Goodwood Revival. It's a full weekend that's streamed on the Goodwood Road and Racing channel, as well as Sky Sports usually on YouTube. And it's a mixture of different racing categories with classic racing cars from pre-World War right up to the mid-1960s. And be sure to keep an eye out for Karun Chandlock and Alex Brundle, who both like to compete at this event. So finally, guys, come to GridRival, and I had a decent result this weekend. I got 989 points for a 2.4 million budget rise. I had Albon, Piastri, Bortoleto, Hajar, Alonso, McLaren. Unfortunately, Alonso got hit by that DNF, but still a good weekend. Alonso is out of contract now. I don't know if Albon is out of contract, but yeah, another climbing ranking, 11,890, so I'm very happy about that. And that is it from me this week, guys. I hope the video hasn't been too long. I will be away next week, obviously, because we've got that break, but I'll be back in 2 weeks to discuss our plans for the Singapore Grand Prix. All the best of luck for Baku, and I'll speak to you soon. Thank you for watching. Bye.